Well, I have a special guest on the line today that is going to talk with us about tech giants and of censorship in the tech industry. And I'm looking forward to that discussion. I know we've talked about it before, and I look forward to having an expert discuss it with us. Our expert today is Davis Soderberg. He is a research associate with the Free Enterprise Project, which is a part of the National Center for Public Policy Research. And you know that we frequently have guests from that wonderful organization. I'm thrilled to have Davis with us today, and he's going to explain to us some of the controversies that are going on in the tech industry with censorship and social media, and perhaps maybe some things that we can be doing as we seek to be sure that our voice is heard in the public square. Davis, good afternoon. We're so happy to be with you today.
Hi, Kathleen. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so what we're going to be talking about is some of these tech giants. And first, could you explain to us the controversy? What is happening with social media and the way that they are handling a speech, basically, on their platforms?
So basically what we're seeing is there is an increase in censorship by these big tech giants, Facebook, Twitter in particular, and they seem to be censoring only one side of the aisle, which is the conservative side. It's become increasingly alarming, especially since we are in such a polarized portion of our country's history. Let me just break down a few things. There are 2.6 billion users on Facebook, and there's 321 million users on Twitter, basically making these two combined the largest public forum in world history. And when there is an ability for these companies to censor things that some people are saying, when this is supposed to be an open public forum and open to public dialogue, it is incredibly dangerous to free speech, and it is giving these companies far more power than what they actually deserve.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you say a public forum, generally when we use the term public forum, we're referring to a government-created public forum that would be under the purview of the First Amendment. How do you see that in terms of the First Amendment, public forum, and then a private business that is allowing people to, for free, basically, for the most part, to use their space on the internet?
Right. This is an interesting thing that I've wrestled with for quite some time now, because as a conservative, I've always believed that we shouldn't be regulating private businesses. I think that they should be able to do what they want. However, there is a special case when it comes to this, because these companies have a monopoly over so many people's voices and over a platform where there are millions and billions of people using it. Mm-hmm. And what it ultimately comes down to is I am pro-freedom before I'm pro-business. I've always thought that freedom should come first. And I know it may seem contradictory to my conservative beliefs. However, when there is a monopoly power like Facebook or Twitter who's openly getting involved in the public discourse and not allowing a certain group of people to have their voices heard, that's when I have an issue. And that's when I believe that there should be regulation involved, or whether it's enacting regulation, there should be revoking some past regulation, which we can talk about with Section 230 of the Telecom Act.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying is that you now see Facebook, especially Facebook with the billions and Twitter with the millions of users, maybe more in the vein of what maybe the telephone companies were back a few decades ago. They maybe became sort of like regulated utilities. Would that be possibly what you're thinking?
Are we referring to the Telecom Act?
Yeah. So regulation of utilities, basically, you would consider it more
right, exactly. So what these platforms, these social media platforms have become is nothing that could have been predicted back in the 1990s. So basically what's happening is with the Telecom Act, it's basically giving the social media companies a platform to explain who they are, and then it provides them a protection from being sued or having other legal actions taken against them. So what they're doing is their platform is acting as an open public town hall, but then they're censoring and editing like their publishers, which is a very dangerous thing and a ton of power in the hands of few individuals.
That is true. And okay, so and we're going to talk. I want to talk about some alternatives to these big tech giants. But would you say that at this point the barriers to entry of competition is so fierce that they do almost act as monopolies simply because, as you said, Facebook has billions of users. Some of these alternatives have barely millions of users. What do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, it is. It's really scary. Obviously, Facebook and Twitter are the top dogs. However, we are seeing a trend with one company in particular, Parler. It is a new platform that people can come and discuss things that they have to say or things that they believe, whether it's political or just in terms of life, and there is no censorship. What's great about Parler is it's growing at a very, very fast rate, which is basically showing that there is a market for this and there is an industry, and we don't always have to bow down to the tech giants. There are becoming other alternatives that people need to be aware of.
Exactly. And thank you for helping me. I've struggled with the pronunciation of this new platform, which is Parler is an alternative to Twitter, right? Not to, or is it limit? Are they limiting the amount of characters that you can have in a particular post?
It's very similar to Twitter. I don't know the exact amount of characters, but yes, it's right around that 150 character limit.
Right.
But it's extremely similar. Instead of the retweet, they call it an echo.
Yeah. So they're trying to distinguish.
It's the same concept, though.
Right.
And it's really a great organization. They've done a really great job of providing people with an alternative where they can feel safe and not think, oh, I have to be careful about what I write because I don't want it to get censored, ultimately changing what they really mean and what they really want to be saying.
Right. And I've talked about Parler quite a bit over the last couple of weeks, especially since the election. And I have been still struggling with how they pronounce their name. I think they originally wanted it to be called Parlay, like in French, parlay, but I think they gave up because only people in Louisiana with a French French heritage probably were the only ones that were using parlay. All right. So, okay. So let's talk a little bit about some of these alternatives. So you've mentioned one, which is Parler, and they're open to every side of the political spectrum, right? They're not just for conservatives. Anybody can go there and participate, correct?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But now what you're seeing with the left is they're saying, well, this is just a conservative platform. And one thing I mentioned in my article about this was CNN's Brian Stelter said, well, they're wanting to get into their own echo chambers, which is so hypocritical because what's happening is that the left is the ones who are creating this issue of censorship that's making a conservative go over
exactly. And they even go so far as to call it a threat to democracy, they said.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'm actually great friends with John Mates, who is the CEO of Parler, and he is more than happy to have everyone from every side of the argument to come there. That's the beauty of the freedom of speech, and that's the beauty of having everyone on one platform. And people need to be aware of it, that it's not just a conservative right-wing social media app. It's for everyone.
And so let's talk about that just for a moment, though. It seems that more conservatives are moving to Parler. More and more you see on Facebook or Twitter where people are saying, I've left Facebook, I've left Twitter, follow me on Parler. And, again, when conservatives use Facebook, they generally do have people of different ideological backgrounds that they communicate with, and that their posts that are seen, they see their posts. So, I mean, it's not a threat to democracy, but is it kind of still neutralizing our message by basically now speaking to the choir as we talk, on Parler or these other alternative sites. We're not able to communicate as we were before with people who may not necessarily agree with us.
Totally. And that's a great point that you brought up, because the other thing that I want to warn people about is don't get off Twitter. Don't get off Facebook, because then what you're doing is exactly what they want you to do.
Right.
They want those voices gone. We still have to fight back from the conservative movement on those platforms. That's still a very important aspect of all of this.
That's a good
But
point.
what I'm saying about Parler is it does allow you to go there without that fear that you're going to be ridiculed or having your things put up as whatever it may be, hate speech or misinformation or all of these terms that we have now. It's just another alternative for you to go and discuss like a reasonable human being.
Right. And especially some of these different big talkers that we know of, like Dinesh D'Souza, who we want to see his message. We want to be able to read what he has to say without Facebook, or Twitter banning him, or him, so many people we know have been put in Facebook or Twitter jail where they're banned from communicating for a certain period of time. So that if we go onto these conservative sites like Parler, at least we would be able to see the messages of people that we really want to see without fear that we're missing it because Facebook is either banning them or is shadow banning, which is a method of preventing people from seeing the person's message as well. So that's a great idea. I never thought of that, and I really appreciate you bringing that up. Don't get off of these other big tech platforms, but make your presence known on some of the ones that are not going to censor the message.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you made a wonderful point that it allows you to see these political figures or these other social figures that you really enjoy their content, but then they keep getting censored. So you can go to Parler and you can see that.
Right. That's a great point. So we know that, so Parler is an alternative to Twitter. Then what do you recommend as far as an alternative to Facebook?
Well, I don't know if there's one that's specifically like Facebook. I think Parler is the best option at the moment. And the reason I say that is because of the growing following that it's gained.
Right.
Last year, they gained over 2 million users. And you just see this trend, especially with how polarized that our country is right now. More and more people are going over there. And we don't want it to become where they're just two different communicating bases. Like we've said over and over, we want people to still stay on Facebook and Twitter. However, Parler, I think, is the best alternative at the moment. And I wouldn't really recommend going anywhere else at the moment.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So instead of us trying to figure out all these other different platforms, look, forget about that. Just go to this one Parler and stick with that for right now so that they can build up.
The one that's already gained steam.
Yes,
exactly. Why not just have the most people go there?
That's a great point. That's a really, really good point. All right, so let's talk about a little more than I wanted to talk about regulation. So you as a free enterprise person and representing the Free Enterprise Institute are, against censorship, of course, but also you would stand for less regulation for companies and for private businesses. And so there's something right now that was never envisioned when it was passed, surely, when the law was passed, the Telecommunications Act, that Congress gave special protection to publishers like newspapers who have letters to the editor. But that now is being used by these big tech companies to shield them from liability, right? So explain about that.
Exactly right.
Yeah, so explain that.
So right, the Section 230 of the Telecom Act it was enacted in 1998, and it allowed these companies to basically have protections from being sued or having legal actions taken against them by people, which ultimately is now a tool that's used by these big tech companies. And what we need to do first is revoke that, because then they're held liable for things that they're doing, and they know that if they're not careful, they may have legal suits taken against them. Mm-hmm. And that alone may make them take a step back and rethink what they are doing. And it gives people more of a relief, or allows them to take a deep breath, knowing that if something did happen where they were censored, they could do something about it.
Now, some would argue that that would kill, say, letters to the editor or comments on the websites of news organizations like, our NOLA.com or The Advocate here in Louisiana. What would you say about that?
Yeah, and I understand that, but then this may come after we revoke the 230 Telecom Act and we rewrite the legislation to where we can be more specific and not have such a large umbrella to where these social media companies can sneak underneath it.
That's excellent. That's an excellent point. So we're not trying to completely do away with the liability protection that companies and platforms enjoy now, but
exactly,
it needs to be reframed, especially since it was written in 1998, and now we're over 20 years later with a completely different landscape that we had back
then. Exactly. That.
Yeah. And I just keep thinking, we're talking about Facebook and about having billions of users and about how it is the behemoth of social media platforms. But remember MySpace? I don't know if you remember that, but that was like the first of these social media. And where are they now? They're in the dustbin of history. Yeah. So, I mean, it is possible. Nobody would have thought that someone would come along that would, replace that, and they did, exactly. And it's not even there anymore. So one final thing. Go ahead, finish up. Go ahead.
And I'll also just add a few things. There was a Pew Research report done that said 43% of the people who use Facebook do use it as their primary news source.
Yes, that's me. And that's me.
It's an incredible amount of power that we're giving Facebook, especially if they're able to act as a publisher or an editor and choose what gets up and what gets moved around and what is seen by the most amount of people.
Right. I mean, basically, I turned my Facebook feed into a news feed of monitoring public websites and people that I know give out valuable information that I would want to know. But like you say, Facebook could very possibly be throttling the stories that I see, and I don't even know it because it's in the background, and they're using their own algorithms to determine exactly what I'm going to see. Right.
And ultimately, Kathleen, this is what it comes down to. We don't need censorship. Now, for some extreme cases, okay, yes. But when it comes to public dialogue and just debating things that are going on in society, we don't need censorship. Because what happens is when you allow ideas from all different angles to come and go after each other with factual evidence and other arguments, it almost works as its own natural censorship mechanism.
Right.
We don't need an independent third party or the internal task force of these large tech companies doing the censoring for us. That comes naturally when multiple people are debating each other. That's right. The beauty of the freedom of speech.
Right. And what I always say is the answer to speech we don't like is more speech, or speech.
Exactly.
So we want more opportunities for people to rebut and refute information that people give. And if they post things that are, there's a lot of false information that people post. They think it sounds good, but it's really not. And so it's up to us to be fact checkers for ourselves. We don't need some big tech or the government telling us what is the truth. We need to ferret out. We're, in some ways, and I fault myself for this too, we're kind of lazy because we just want to read things and accept them as true, but we really need to ferret out the truth and be sure that what we're reading and believing is actually the truth. So, all right.
You're spot on.
All right, Davis Soderberg. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Tell us how our listeners can find out more about the Free Enterprise Project.
Yeah, so you just go on nationalcenter.org and there is a tab with the Free Enterprise Project, and you can check out our blogs. You can do some more research on us. We got some wonderful articles. We have some wonderful people who are research fellows who write, and there's a lot of great information on that website, nationalcenter.org. We'd love for you to come visit and see what we're all about.
All right, Davis. Well, thank you so much for being with us today and for all the great information. And I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thanks a lot, Kathleen. Take care.